The torches of Mooncrest burned brighter on mating ceremony night than any other night of the year, as if even the fire itself understood that something sacred was about to happen. Trisha had heard the rule whispered since she was a child, the same way children everywhere learn which floorboards creak and which elders not to anger. Only daughters of noble blood may stand before the Alpha King on choosing night. Servants watched from the kitchens, if they watched at all. Omegas without rank didn't dream of moonlit clearings or crowns of silver light. They scrubbed floors, carried water, and kept their eyes down when royalty passed. Trisha had broken that rule in her heart 1,000 times. She was 19, with curls she could never tame and ink-stained fingers from mending the estate's ledgers long after the kitchen staff had gone to bed. She talked to the kingdom's stray wolves like they understood her, and some nights, she swore they did. She had a habit of forgetting the names of the herbs she collected from the forest edge, even though she never forgot what they cured. Loneliness had made her good at small things. It had not made her good at being noticed. Except for him. She had seen Alpha King Mackie only a handful of times, once across a courtyard, once through a window she had no business looking through, and each time, something in her chest had reacted before her mind could stop it. He was the kind of man legends were built around, dark curls damp with mist, ceremonial armor catching torchlight like captured stars, a jaw set permanently somewhere between command and restraint. The kind of man a servant girl was supposed to admire from a distance and never, ever follow into the woods. "You're actually going to do it," her friend Wren whispered that night, eyes wide with a mixture of horror and delight. "You're going to hide in the trees and watch the choosing." "I'm not hiding," Trisha lied. "I'm walking. In a forest. That happens to be near a sacred ceremony." Wren didn't believe her for a second. Neither did Trisha. By the time she reached the ceremonial grounds, the noble daughters were already arriving, a procession of silk and pride, daughters of alphas from every territory in the Northern Pack Alliance, each one praying tonight would be the night she became Luna. Trisha pressed herself behind the wide trunk of an old oak at the clearing's edge, heart hammering, and told herself this was foolish. Reckless. A servant girl had no business here. If she were caught, it wouldn't be embarrassment waiting for her, it would be punishment. The council did not forgive trespassers on sacred ground, not even ones who only wanted to look. She told herself all of that. She stayed anyway. The crowd hushed as Mackie entered. He moved like something carved rather than born, broad-shouldered, dark-cloaked, his presence pressing against the clearing like a held breath. The noble daughters straightened. Mothers nudged daughters forward. Somewhere, an elder began the ancient words of the choosing, words older than the kingdom itself, words that bound a king to his Luna beneath the full moon's silver eye. Trisha watched him the way she always did, quietly, hungrily, certain she was invisible. She was wrong. Halfway through the elder's chant, Mackie's head turned. Not toward the noble daughters arranged so carefully before him. Not toward Lady Serena, who stood radiant and certain at the front of the line, already wearing the small, satisfied smile of a woman who believed the night belonged to her. He turned toward the trees. Toward her. A low growl rolled through the clearing, not from any wolf in the crowd, but from him, from somewhere ancient inside him that recognized something his eyes hadn't caught up to yet. The chanting stopped. The torches seemed to still. 300 pairs of eyes followed his gaze into the darkness where Trisha crouched, frozen, certain her heart could be heard from the front row. "Alpha King," an elder began, alarmed. Mackie didn't look away from the trees. "Stop hiding." His voice cracked across the clearing like thunder splitting open the sky, raw and commanding and edged with something that sounded almost like relief. "You are mine forever." The kingdom held its breath. And somewhere behind that ancient oak, a servant girl who had spent her whole life believing she was no one realized, with a cold rush of terror and an unbearable, traitorous warmth blooming in her chest, he was talking to her. For 3 full heartbeats, no one in the clearing moved. Then chaos broke loose like a dam giving way. "He cannot mean this," an elder hissed, clutching the ceremonial staff like it might steady the entire collapsing night. Noble mothers gasped behind raised hands. Lady Serena's satisfied smile cracked at the edges, replaced by something colder and far more dangerous: humiliation, sharp and public, the kind that doesn't forgive easily. Mackie didn't hear any of it. Didn't care to. His wolf had taken the reins the moment that scent reached him, wildflowers and parchment and something underneath that smelled, impossibly, like home. 300 years of pack law said an Alpha King chose his Luna from noble bloodlines, chose with his head, his territory, his alliances. His wolf had never read that law and wouldn't have obeyed it if he had. "Mine," the wolf snarled, already shifting, already moving. "Mine. Found. Mine." Alpha, his beta, Conrad, started, alarmed, reaching for his arm. Too late. Mackie was already gone, armor falling away as black fur rippled across his frame mid-stride, until a massive wolf tore into the tree-line where a girl's silhouette had vanished into darkness only seconds before. Trisha ran like the forest itself was trying to swallow her. She didn't think about the brambles tearing at her skirt or the roots threatening to send her sprawling. She thought about the sound of his growl, low and possessive, still echoing in her bones. She thought about 300 noble eyes that would soon be searching for the servant girl foolish enough to disrupt the most sacred night in Mooncrest history. She thought, "I have ruined everything," and didn't stop running long enough to wonder why some small, traitorous part of her didn't entirely want to be caught. Behind her, impossibly fast, she heard him. Not running. Hunting. She cut left at the old creek bed, the one she'd known since childhood, the one no noble would ever bother learning. She pressed herself into the hollow beneath a fallen log, heart slamming, breath shaking, and waited. The growling stopped. Silence stretched so long she thought she'd lost him. Then, faint, frustrated, unmistakably his, a huff of breath somewhere just beyond the creek. Searching. Circling. So close she could have reached out and touched damp black fur if she'd dared move a single inch. He didn't find her. Not that night. Mackie searched until the moon dropped low and the torches behind him burned to embers. He searched until Conrad found him kneeling in the dirt at the creek's edge, human again, staring at a single curl of fabric torn from a servant's skirt, the only proof she had ever been real at all. "My king." Conrad kept his voice low, careful. "The council is demanding answers. Lady Serena's father is. I don't care what Serena's father is doing." Mackie turned the scrap of fabric over in his fingers like it might tell him her name if he held it long enough. "Did you feel it? When the wind shifted?" Conrad hesitated. "Feel what, my king?" Mackie didn't answer right away. How did a man explain a pull that lived somewhere beneath logic, beneath duty, beneath 3 centuries of careful pack law? How did he explain that for one breathless moment in that clearing, the constant low hum of responsibility that had filled his chest since the day he took the crown had simply gone quiet? Replaced by something that felt, for the very first time in his life, like peace. "She's out there," he said instead, low and certain. "Somewhere in my territory. Breathing my air. And I am going to find her if it takes me the rest of my life." Conrad studied him for a long moment, long enough that Mackie almost expected another argument about duty, about Serena, about the noble families already gathering their outrage like kindling for a fire that would need to be answered by morning. Instead, his beta simply nodded. "Then I'll have the trackers ready by dawn." Half a mile away, soaked to the knees and shivering in a hollow beneath a dead log, Trisha finally let herself breathe. She should have felt only terror. She did feel terror, cold and clawing and entirely reasonable, given what she'd just done. But beneath it, stubborn and inconvenient, something else stirred too. A warm flow in her chest that had nothing to do with fear at all. A pull, faint but undeniable, tugging her back the way she'd come, back toward the clearing, back toward him, even as every instinct screamed at her to run the other direction and never look back. This isn't real, she told herself, climbing out of the hollow on shaking legs. He doesn't know me. He couldn't possibly want me. But her wolfless, ordinary servant's heart was already betraying her, because some small and terrified part of it whispered back. What if he does? 3 days passed, and Mackie did not sleep. He told himself it was duty keeping him awake, trade disputes along the eastern border, a council demanding explanations he refused to give, Lady Serena's father requesting an audience. Mackie kept finding reasons to delay. But duty had never once made him dream, and for 3 nights running, the same dream found him anyway, wildflowers and parchment, a curl of brown hair vanishing into darkness, a voice he'd never actually heard speaking words he'd somehow already memorized. You look like a man being haunted, Conrad observed on the 4th morning, setting a stack of unread reports on the table Mackie hadn't touched in days. I am being haunted. Mackie didn't look up from the window. By a woman whose name I don't even know. The trackers had found nothing. A torn hem of fabric, a half set of footprints near the creek, and then, nothing. Whoever she was, she knew the forest better than his own scouts did. It should have frustrated him. Instead, absurdly, it made him want her more. A servant girl was the most powerful Alpha King alive's mate. That was a story old enough to outlast crowns. He went to the royal estate that morning under the thin pretense of reviewing the household ledgers, something he had never once done personally in 8 years as king, and something his steward found so baffling he didn't dare question it aloud. He smelled her before he saw her. Wildflowers. Parchment. Home. She was kneeling in the herb garden behind the kitchens, sleeves pushed up, fingers stained green, murmuring something low and apologetic to a half-wild stray wolf that had clearly decided she belonged to it now. She hadn't noticed him yet. For one suspended moment, Mackie simply watched her, the curls escaping her braid, the soft furrow of concentration between her brows, the way she forgot, mid-sentence, the name of the herb in her hand and called it, the purple one that helps with fever, instead. Then she looked up. And every careful, kingly thought in his head went silent. She went pale. The stray wolf at her side let out a low, uneasy whine and pressed closer to her leg, as if it, too, recognized exactly what was happening. You, Mackie said. Quiet. Certain. As if the word itself were an anchor he'd been searching for. Trisha didn't run this time. There was nowhere to run, and some treacherous part of her didn't want to, even as panic climbed her throat. My king, I don't know what you. Don't. His voice wasn't a command. It was almost a plea. Don't pretend you weren't in those trees. Silence stretched between them, taut as a held breath. Up close, he wasn't the unreachable, armored figure from the ceremony. He was a man with tired eyes and 3 days of beard growth, looking at her like she was the only steady thing in a world that had gone sideways. And she, God's help her, was looking back the exact same way. I ruined your ceremony, she whispered. I should have stayed away. You should have stayed exactly where you were. A faint, helpless smile tugged at his mouth. I'd have found you eventually. My wolf doesn't lose what it's claimed. Your wolf doesn't know me. You don't know me. Trisha's hands twisted in her apron, grounding herself against the pull she felt every time his eyes held hers, a pull that made absolutely no sense for a servant girl and a king who shouldn't even know her name. I'm no one. I clean floors and mend ledgers. I'm not, her voice cracked. I'm not what you need. You're exactly what I need. He said it simply, like a fact, not a courtship. I haven't slept in 3 days because some part of me already knows that. Tell me your name, and I'll stop chasing ghosts. She hesitated for only a moment. Trisha. He repeated it once, quietly, like learning a sacred word. Trisha. Neither of them moved closer. Neither of them stepped away. The stray wolf at Trisha's feet finally settled, tail curling around its paws, as if satisfied that whatever had just happened in this garden was right, even if the two humans standing in the middle of it were both too frightened to admit it yet. That night, Mackie found Conrad in the war room, staring at maps neither of them had any intention of discussing. Well? Conrad asked. Mackie poured himself a drink he didn't taste. For 3 days he told himself this was about duty, about a king's restless mind, about anything except the truth sitting heavy and undeniable in his chest. "I've found her," he said. Conrad set down his pen slowly. "My king. Do you understand what that means? For the council. For Serena's family. For. I understand exactly what it means." Mackie looked up, and for the first time in 3 days, something in his exhausted eyes had settled into certainty. "It means I'm not letting her go." Mackie returned to the royal estate the next day. And the day after that. And the day after that, until his steward stopped questioning why the Alpha King suddenly cared so deeply about household ledgers that hadn't changed in a decade. "You're doing the thing again," Trisha said on the 5th visit, not looking up from the herb basket she was sorting. "What thing?" "Pretending you're here for the ledgers." She finally glanced at him, a small, knowing smile tugging at her mouth, the first time he'd seen her look at him without fear underneath it. "You haven't opened a single one." "They're very well organized," Mackie said gravely. "I have nothing to add." She laughed, a real laugh, surprised out of her, and something in Mackie's chest cracked open and rebuilt itself entirely. He found himself memorizing the sound the way he memorized border treaties, thoroughly, permanently. It became a pattern neither of them named aloud. Garden walks that lasted far longer than necessary. Quiet conversations on the estate's stone steps as the sun went down. He learned that she talked to every stray wolf on the property like they owed her gossip. She learned that he hummed, low and absent, whenever he was thinking hard, a habit, he admitted, embarrassed, that his old war tutor used to mock him for. "You're not what I expected," Trisha told him one evening, sitting close enough that their shoulders nearly touched. "An Alpha King who hums. You're not what I expected either." His voice had gone soft in a way that made her pulse stutter. "A servant girl who isn't afraid to tell her king he's being ridiculous. Someone has to." He laughed, and the sound undid her a little more than she was ready to admit. It was a small moment, days later, that she would remember longest. He'd come to the estate with a torn knuckle from sparring practice, waving off his own steward's concern, insisting it was nothing. Trisha had simply taken his hand without asking permission, cleaning the wound with steady, practiced fingers while he sat very still and very awkward, clearly unused to being fussed over by anyone in his life. "You don't have to do this," he murmured. "I know." She didn't look up. "I'm doing it anyway." He watched her work in silence, something unguarded settling over his face, the look of a man discovering, slowly and without permission, that he'd let someone close enough to matter. For the first time since taking the crown, he wasn't an Alpha King being managed, protected, or used. He was simply a man whose hand someone cared enough to hold steady. That was the moment he stopped pretending this was anything but love. The trouble was, the kingdom hadn't caught up to his heart yet. Lady Serena had not left Mooncrest after her humiliation at the ceremony, she'd simply waited, patient and venomous, certain the king's distraction would pass. Daughter of one of the most powerful alphas in the Northern Territories, she had spent years being told she was destined for the crown. She did not intend to lose it to a servant who couldn't even claim noble blood. He'll tire of her, she told her father over dinner, swirling wine she didn't drink. Kings always do, with girls like that. She was wrong, and she would learn exactly how wrong 3 days later, when Mackie called an emergency council session and stood before every noble family in Mooncrest with a calm, immovable certainty that made even the eldest elders fall silent. "I have made my choice," he said. "Trisha will be my mate. My Luna. I am not asking the council's permission. I am informing you of my decision." The room exploded. "She has no bloodline," one elder shouted. "No title, no lineage worth speaking of." "She has my wolf's recognition," Mackie said, voice cutting clean through the chamber. "That has always been the only requirement that mattered. The rest is tradition dressed up as law." Serena rose from her seat, face white with fury barely held in check. "You would humiliate every noble house in this kingdom for a servant?" "I would humiliate every noble house in this kingdom for my mate," Mackie corrected, unmoved. "There's a difference, Lady Serena, though I understand why you wouldn't see it." The silence that followed was the loudest sound in the room. Serena said nothing more that day. She simply turned, swept her skirts around her, and walked out of the chamber with her spine perfectly straight, the posture of a woman already planning her revenge. In the hallway outside, alone, she finally let her mask slip. "She will never wear that crown," Serena whispered to no one. "Whatever it takes. I will make sure of it." Rumors moved faster than wolves in Mooncrest, and within a week, Lady Serena had made certain every single one of them carried Trisha's name. It started small. Whispers in the marketplace about a servant girl who'd bewitched the king with some forbidden charm. Then larger, claims that Trisha had crept into the royal chambers uninvited, that she'd been seen consorting with rogue wolves beyond the border, that no respectable alpha bloodline would ever produce a daughter so eager to hide in trees like prey. None of it was true. All of it spread like wildfire anyway. "They look at me differently now," Trisha admitted one evening, sitting on the estate steps with her knees pulled to her chest. "The kitchen staff. The guards. Even Ren's mother won't meet my eyes anymore." Mackie sat beside her, close enough that his shoulder pressed warm against hers. "I'll have the rumors silenced." "You can't silence whispers, Mackie. You can only outlast them." She said his name without the title now, had been saying it that way for days, quietly, like a secret she'd decided she was allowed to keep. "I just didn't expect it to hurt this much." He reached over, slow and careful, and laced his fingers through hers. It was the first time he'd done it without hesitation, without pretending it was accidental. "I'm not going anywhere. Whatever they say about you, I'm not going anywhere. Promise me." Her voice cracked, just slightly. "Promise you won't let them push you into changing your mind." "I promise." He brought her hand to his lips, pressing a kiss against her knuckles like a vow sealed in something older than words. "You are not a mistake I'm going to correct, Trisha. You're the only decision I've made as king that's ever felt right." She believed him. She wanted, desperately, to let that be enough. Serena, watching from a balcony above the garden, believed nothing of the sort. "He's protecting her like she's already Luna," she hissed to her father, who had begun to look less furious and more calculating by the day. "We need something stronger than rumors. Something he can't argue away with a kiss on her hand." "Patience," her father said. "Every servant has a past. Find hers." Serena did exactly that, paying coin to estate records keepers who shouldn't have taken it, sending quiet questions to villages Trisha had never mentioned growing up in. It took 2 weeks of careful digging before one old midwife, frightened and well paid, finally spoke a name Serena hadn't expected. "The child wasn't born to servants at all," the old woman whispered. "She was brought to them. As an infant. Wrapped in silver-threaded cloth, with markings on her wrist nobody in that village had ever seen before. The mistress of the house was told to raise her quietly. Told never to ask questions. Serena's pulse quickened. Markings. What kind of markings? The old woman only shook her head, suddenly pale. The kind the old wolves used to fear. The kind from before the first packs were even formed. Serena didn't fully understand what she'd uncovered. But she understood enough to know it was useful, a secret buried deep enough that even Trisha herself likely didn't know it existed. Good girl, Serena murmured to herself, smiling for the first time in weeks. Whatever you're hiding, I'll find a way to make it destroy you. Trisha, blissfully unaware that her own forgotten origins had just become a weapon, spent that same evening curled beside Mackie near the fire pit behind the estate kitchens, listening to him hum some old, wordless tune under his breath. You do that without realizing it, she said. The humming. My old war tutor used to throw boots at me for it. He smiled, sheepish. Said future king shouldn't sound like a kettle when he's thinking. I like it. She tucked herself closer against his side, and he wrapped an arm around her without thinking twice, like the motion had already become instinct. It means I always know where you are in a room. Is that so? You hum loudest when you're nervous. Like right now. He laughed, low and warm, and pressed a kiss to the top of her head. You've been paying very close attention to me, servant girl. Someone has to, she echoed his own words back at him, and felt him go quiet, content, in the way only people who feel safe with each other ever truly go quiet. Neither of them noticed Serena's spies watching from the tree lean, already carrying word of tonight's scandalous closeness back to a woman who intended to turn every soft moment between them into a weapon. The kingdom was still calm. But not for much longer. The whispers turned cruel faster than Trisha could have prepared for. Within days, Serena had woven the midwife's frightened words into something far uglier, not a mystery, but an accusation. The servant girl is cursed. Marked by dark magic before she was even given to that village. The king has bound himself to something unnatural. She didn't need the rumors to be true. She only needed them whispered in enough frightened ears. They're saying I brought a plague omen into the estate, Trisha told Mackie one evening, her voice flat with exhaustion rather than tears. She'd run out of those days ago. A kitchen boy quit yesterday. Said he wouldn't work somewhere cursed. It's not true. Mackie's jaw was tight, his wolf simmering close beneath the surface. None of it is true. It doesn't matter if it's true. It matters that people believe it. She wrapped her arms around herself. I'm costing you everything, Mackie. Your council won't approve trade agreements while this scandal hangs over the estate. 2 border villages have stopped paying tribute because they think the crown is cursed. I hear it in every conversation now, the kingdom is suffering because of me. The kingdom is suffering because Serena is poisoning wells out of spite, Mackie corrected, gently but firmly. Not because of you. She didn't argue. But she didn't believe him either, not fully, not with the weight she carried alone. That weight grew heavier still when the dream started. Silver light, ancient and cold, pooling around her wrists like water that never quite touched skin. Symbols she didn't recognize burning faintly behind her eyelids each night, dawn by morning, leaving only a strange, hollow ache behind. She told no one, not even Mackie. What was there to say? I think something is wrong with me, and I don't know what. She wasn't the only one noticing. The strays near the estate won't settle, one of the elders murmured to Mackie privately, watching from the tree lean as wolves that had once wandered freely now paced restlessly near Trisha's window each night, whining low and uneasy. It isn't fear, my king. It's recognition. I've seen this before, old stories, the kind we don't tell anymore. Wolves react this way around bloodlines tied to the very first packs. Mackie said nothing, though something cold settled in his chest. He didn't yet understand what the elder meant. But he understood enough to know Trisha's origins ran far deeper than anyone, including her, currently realized. Trisha noticed his silence after that conversation. Noticed the careful way he watched her now, like he was trying to solve a puzzle he hadn't told her existed. "You're hiding something," she said quietly, one evening by the fire pit that had become theirs. "I'm not hiding anything from you." He took her hand, turning it over gently, studying the faint, pale mark on her wrist she'd had since childhood and never thought twice about. "I just think there's something about you even you don't know yet. That's not comforting. It's not meant to scare you either." He pressed a kiss to her wrist, right over the mark, soft and unhurried. "Whatever it is, it doesn't change anything. You're still the only person who's ever made this crown feel light instead of heavy." She wanted to believe that completely. But guilt had already taken root too deep. That night, alone in her small room above the kitchens, Trisha made the decision she'd been circling for weeks. She thought of the kitchen boy who'd quit. The border villages refused tribute. The council's fury. Mackie's exhausted eyes, carrying a weight that had only grown heavier since the night he found her in that garden. "I am not worth a kingdom's suffering," she told herself, packing the few things she owned into a worn bag with trembling hands. "Even if I love him. Especially because I love him." She wrote the letter slowly, each word costing her something. "Mackie, I am not leaving because I don't love you. I'm leaving because I do. You deserve a Luna who brings your kingdom peace, not chaos. Please don't search for me. Let me be the one good thing I can give you, the absence of all this trouble. Trisha." She left it on the kitchen table where he'd found it, folded the way she folded everything, careful, precise, like she was trying to leave as little mess behind as possible, even in heartbreak. Before dawn broke over Mooncrest, Trisha slipped past the sleeping estate, past the restless strays who whined and pressed against the fence as if begging her to stay, and disappeared into the forest that had hidden her once before. This time, she wasn't hiding to watch a ceremony. She was hiding from the only home she'd ever truly wanted. Mackie found the letter at sunrise, and for one terrible, suspended moment, he simply stared at it without breathing. Then his wolf tore loose. Trisha. The name ripped out of him before he'd even finished reading, before Conrad came running, before the entire estate woke to the sound of their king's voice cracking the morning open like thunder. He read the letter twice, 3 times, his hands shaking in a way 3 centuries of royal composure had never once allowed before. "Let me be the one good thing I can give you." "She thinks leaving is a gift," he said, voice hoarse, crumpling the paper in his fist. "She thinks I'd rather have peace than her." "My king," Conrad started carefully. "Get the trackers. Get every wolf loyal to this crown. I don't care what's on the council's schedule today." Mackie was already shedding his tunic, already feeling his wolf claw forward beneath his skin, desperate and furious and terrified all at once. "We found her. Today." He abandoned every responsibility waiting for him that morning, a trade negotiation, a council hearing, an entire day's worth of duties that would have once defined him completely. None of it mattered. None of it had ever mattered as much as the scent he was already chasing through the tree line, wild and unraveling, the same scent that had once turned a sacred ceremony to chaos. He searched through forests that didn't belong to his territory. Through mountain passes where the air went thin and cold. He tracked her for 2 full days, sleeping only when his body gave him no choice, eating only when Conrad physically forced food into his hands. Somewhere on the second night, exhausted and alone beneath unfamiliar stars, Mackie finally let himself think, really think, about why he was doing this. It wasn't only the mate bond. The bond had pulled him toward her, yes, that first night in the clearing, but it hadn't made him fall in love with the particular way she forgot the names of her own herbs, or the stubborn line of her shoulders when she refused to be afraid of him, or the steady, careful way she'd cleaned a torn knuckle like his pain mattered more than his crown. He hadn't loved her because his wolf demanded it. He'd loved her because she was the only person in his entire life who had ever looked at him and seen a man first, a king second. She confronts me without flinching, he realized, staring up at a sky that felt suddenly, achingly empty without her beneath it. She's the only person who's never once been afraid to tell me I'm wrong. I didn't fall for an obligation. I fell for her. He found her scent again at dawn, faint, fading, leading toward a lake he vaguely remembered from old border maps. He ran the rest of the way on 4 legs. Trisha sat at the edge of the moonlit lake, knees pulled to her chest, watching her own reflection ripple apart every time the wind disturbed the water. She'd told herself leaving was an act of love. 2 days of cold nights and gnawing hunger had not made that conviction feel any less hollow. She missed him with a physical ache that frightened her, missed his terrible humming, the warmth of his hand wrapped around hers, the steady way he said her name like it was something worth protecting. She didn't hear him approach. She felt him instead, that same pull from the ceremony night, stronger now, undeniable, like her own heartbeat had started keeping time with someone else's. Trisha. She turned, and there he was, exhausted, wind-torn, looking at her like she'd personally pulled the moon down out of the sky just to make him chase it. "You shouldn't have come," she whispered, even as every part of her wanted to run straight into his arms. "I will always come." He crossed the distance between them slowly, like she might bolt again, though they both knew she wouldn't. "I read your letter. You think leaving was a gift you gave me. It was supposed to be. It wasn't." He knelt in front of her, taking her cold hands in his, pressing warmth back into fingers that had gone numb with 2 days of fear and forest air. "Trisha, you didn't take peace away by staying. You are the peace. Every single thing that's felt right in my life since the night I found you in that garden, that's been you. Not duty. Not tradition. You." Her eyes burned, tears finally breaking free after days of holding them back. "I was so afraid I was ruining you. You're the only thing that's ever made me feel whole." He brushed a tear from her cheek with a gentleness that undid her completely. "You are my kingdom, Trisha. Not the crown. Not the territory. You." She didn't have words left to argue with that. She didn't want to. For the first time since the night she'd hidden behind an old oak tree and changed both their lives forever, Trisha let herself simply lean into him, into the warmth of his arms, the steady drum of his heartbeat, the quiet, undeniable truth that she had never actually wanted to run from him at all. She had only ever wanted to be wanted enough to stop hiding. And beneath a silver moon reflected in still water, she finally was. They stayed by the lake until the sky began to lighten, neither of them in any hurry to break the silence that had finally settled between them, the good kind, the kind that didn't need filling. "I have to tell you something," Trisha said eventually, her head resting against his shoulder. "Something I've never told anyone. Not even Ren." Mackie went still, giving her his full attention the way he always did when she spoke, like nothing else in the world was worth hearing instead. "I used to lie awake as a girl and imagine a different life," she admitted. "Not a grander one. Just one where someone chose me. Where I wasn't an afterthought in someone else's house. I never let myself believe it would actually happen. It felt safer to expect nothing." She let out a small, shaky laugh. "And then you stood in a sacred clearing and shouted at a tree." "In my defense," Mackie said, "the tree was hiding something extraordinary." She smiled, but it faded quickly. "I left because I believed loving you would only ever cost you something. I still don't fully understand what's happening to me, the dreams, the markings, whatever Serena thinks she's found. I'm scared of becoming a burden you can't put down. Then let me tell you what I see instead. He turned to face her fully, taking both her hands in his. I see a woman who held my hand steady when I couldn't sit still for my own wound. Who never once flinched when I told her the truth, even when the truth was inconvenient. Who forgets the names of flowers but never forgets the people who need her. His voice dropped, rough with feeling. I don't love you despite the cost, Trisha. I'd pay it 1,000 times over. You're not a burden. You're the first thing in my entire life I've ever chosen completely for myself. Her breath caught. Mackie. I'm not finished. He brought her hand to his chest, pressing it flat over his heart, steady and racing all at once. I told myself for days this was the bond talking. That my wolf simply recognized something my mind hadn't caught up to. But it was never just the bond. It's the way you've made this crown feel like mine again, instead of something I was just carrying for everyone else. You didn't complicate my life, Trisha. You gave it back to me. She didn't trust her voice, so she let her actions answer instead, closing the last small distance between them, her hand sliding up to rest against his jaw exactly the way she'd wanted to since the garden, since the ceremony, since the very first moment she'd watched him from behind that oak tree and felt something in her chest recognize him before she understood why. I love you, she whispered, the words finally loose after weeks of swallowing them down. I think I loved you before I even let myself admit it. That's why leaving hurt so much. I wasn't protecting you. I was protecting myself from how much I already needed you. Say it again, Mackie murmured, forehead resting against hers. I love you. He closed the distance and kissed her, slow at first, almost disbelieving, like he needed a moment to confirm this was real and not another dream stitched together from her scent and his exhaustion. Then deeper, surer, his hand cradling the back of her neck like she was something he intended to hold onto for the rest of his life. She melted into him without hesitation, every fear she'd carried from the estate to the lake dissolving into something far simpler and far stronger. When they finally broke apart, both a little breathless, Mackie pressed his forehead to hers and laughed, a low, helpless sound of relief. I was prepared to chase you across every territory in the Northern Alliance, he admitted. I'm glad it didn't come to that. My feet were already tired. Mine too, if I'm honest. He pulled back just far enough to look at her properly, brushing a stray curl from her face. Trisha. Whatever you are, whatever those markings mean, whatever ancient bloodline the elders are whispering about, none of it changes what I already know. My wolf chose you before either of us understood why. I'm simply catching up to him. She felt the mate bond settle fully between them then, not the frantic pull of that first ceremony night, but something steadier, warmer, like a door closing gently on every doubt she'd carried alone. She stopped resisting it. Stopped bracing for it to be taken away. For the first time in her life, she let herself simply belong to someone. It was Conrad who found them an hour later, breathless from tracking, relief written plainly across his face, relief that faded the instant he held out a folded note one of the estate guards had intercepted overnight. My king, he said carefully, you should see this before you return. Mackie unfolded it, and Trisha watched his expression shift from contentment to something far colder. What is it? She asked. Evidence, Mackie said grimly, that Lady Serena has been paying border villages to spread the rumors against you, and that she's uncovered something about your past she intends to use the moment we return. Trisha's stomach tightened, but for the first time, fear didn't win out over resolve. Then we go back, she said, lacing her fingers through his. Together. No more hiding. Mackie pressed a kiss to her temple, something fierce and certain settling over his features. Together, he agreed. Side by side, exactly as it should be. The council chamber had never been so full. Word of the king's return, and of Lady Serena's scheming, had spread faster than any rumor she herself had ever spread. Every noble house in Mooncrest had gathered to watch the reckoning, and Trisha stood at Mackie's side at the center of it, spine straight, chin lifted, refusing to let fear curl her shoulders the way it once had behind an oak tree. Lady Serena. Mackie's voice carried easily across the silent chamber. You paid 3 border villages to spread false claims against my chosen mate. You bribed a midwife for information about her past, intending to use it as a weapon. Do you deny it? Serena's father shifted uncomfortably beside her, already distancing himself with his silence. Serena lifted her chin anyway, defiant to the last. I deny nothing, she said coldly. I did what any woman raised to be Luna would do when an unworthy servant stole what was promised to her. Nothing was promised to you, Mackie said. Only assumed. There's a difference, and tonight the council will remember it. One by one, the evidence Conrad had gathered was laid before the elders, payments, letters, frightened testimonies finally spoken aloud without coercion. Serena's allies, sensing the tide had turned, withdrew their support with the swift, practical cruelty of nobles protecting their own names. By the time the hearing ended, Serena stood alone, stripped of her father's backing and the influence she'd spent years building. You will leave Mooncrest's court, Mackie said, and you will not return while I wear this crown. Serena's composure finally cracked, not into tears, but into something colder. She looked at Trisha one last time. Enjoy your king, she said bitterly. I hope he's worth what you'll lose. She didn't know yet how wrong she was. The new ceremony was held 7 days later, beneath the same silver moon that had once watched a frightened servant girl hide behind an old oak tree. This time, Trisha didn't hide. She walked into the clearing in pale ceremonial silk, head high, hand steady in Mackie's, while the entire kingdom watched, not with the shocked horror of that first night, but with something that had slowly, grudgingly, become respect. The elder began the ancient words of the bonding rite, the same words spoken for centuries. Halfway through, the air changed. A pulse of brilliant silver light erupted from the mark on Trisha's wrist, the same faint scar she'd carried her whole life and never questioned, spreading up her arm in ancient, glowing symbols that hadn't been seen in Mooncrest for generations. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Elders who had lived 100 years staggered back, eyes wide with something between fear and reverence. It's true, one ancient elder whispered, falling to one knee. The old bloodline. The first pack's bloodline. It survived. Mackie gripped Trisha's hand tighter, steady even as the light wrapped around them both. Trisha. I don't understand, she breathed, staring at the markings glowing beneath her skin like something finally waking up after a long, patient sleep. You will, the elder said, voice trembling with awe. Child, you descend from the very first Alpha line, the bloodline every pack on this continent traces its laws back to. It explains why his wolf knew you instantly. Recognition that old does not happen by accident. It happens because the bond was always written long before either of you were born. The light faded as gently as it had come, leaving only silence and the soft, stunned breathing of an entire kingdom recalibrating everything it thought it understood about destiny. Trisha turned to Mackie, eyes wide. I was abandoned as an infant. Brought to a village with no explanation. I thought I had no history at all. You had the oldest history in this kingdom, Mackie said softly, brushing his thumb over the now quiet mark on her wrist. It just took you 19 years and one moonlit ceremony to find it. The kingdom that had once whispered against her now knelt before her. Trisha became Luna Queen of Mooncrest within the month, not through inherited title, but through a bond no elder dared question again, and a bloodline that rewrote everything the council thought they knew about worth. The servant girl who had once mended ledgers by candlelight now sat beside the Alpha King in a council she'd once been forbidden to even approach, her quiet wisdom tempering decisions that had once been made by pride alone. Peace, slow and steady, returned to Mooncrest in her wake. Months later, beneath the same silver moon, Mackie found her exactly where he always did, sitting near the garden, talking softly to a stray wolf, forgetting the name of some small purple flower in her hands. "You still don't remember what that's called," he said, settling beside her. "I remember what it cures. That's enough." She leaned into him, the way she had 1,000 times since the lake, since the kiss, since the night she finally stopped running. He wrapped his arms around her, resting his chin against her hair, and thought, not for the first time, about how close he'd come to losing this. About a girl hiding behind an oak tree, certain she was invisible, never once imagining a king's wolf could see her perfectly clearly. "Do you remember," he murmured, "the first thing I ever said to you?" She smiled against his shoulder, already knowing. "Stop hiding," he whispered, low and warm, exactly as he had that very first night. "You are mine forever." And beneath the silver moon, with the whole kingdom finally watching them in peace instead of panic, Trisha, servant girl turned Luna Queen, the woman destiny had been quietly guiding toward him all along, finally, completely, stopped hiding for good. Thank you for listening to Trisha's story. I hope you enjoyed it. Make sure you subscribe to the channel and join the pack for more werewolf romance stories.